Sometimes empathy feels easier when we're with a friend or a stranger, but when we're face to face with our own family or someone who has wounded us more deeply, it can feel more challenging. This is part 2 of my last video about empathy, and we'll start off with the concept of staying with empathy, both for ourselves and for others, even when the people that we long for connection the most may never be able to offer empathy back to us. In conversation, empathy isn't a quick fix. Sometimes it takes a while before the other person feels satisfied and heard, before their words soften or their body relaxes. Imagine your friend says, "Nobody cares about me, I'm always alone." If you respond once with, "Are you feeling lonely, needing more support?" they might shrug and keep going. But if you keep staying with it, gently reflecting back to them what you think they might be experiencing, maybe you're feeling discouraged, wishing people would reach out. Maybe they go silent and you add, "Are you wanting to know that you truly matter?" Eventually, with enough reflection, there's a visible shift. Their shoulders drop, their breathing slows, and you can feel a release in their whole being. That's when empathy has landed. True empathy versus emotional slavery. To empathize is to enter the other person's inner world without dragging in your own self-blame, defense, or assumptions. True empathy is simply holding space for their feelings and their needs. False empathy, what Marshall calls emotional slavery, is when you take on responsibility for their pain. You're upset, "Oh, it must be my fault, I'm such a terrible person." That's not empathy. That's self-blame in disguise. If someone is yelling, true empathy might sound like, "Are you feeling frustrated and needing more respect for your perspective?" False empathy might sound like, "You're right, I always mess things up. I shouldn't have said anything. I'm such a disappointment." One deepens connection and the other erases it. Prioritize connection over being right. It's hardest with family, especially my father. Staying present is like wrestling a storm. The temptation is to run away or shut down. When I can simplify his energy into the basics, mad, sad, glad, or scared, it helps me remember behind his words, he's just a human being with unmet needs. Still, one of the hardest truths about empathy is letting go of the need to be right. If I could just emphasize that one phrase the most of this entire video, let go of the need to be right. And my father, he's always had to be right, even if it costs connection with his own daughter. That's the tragedy of prioritizing being right over being close. Sometimes you just have to agree to disagree and just have compassion for the other person and make the choice to forgive or empathize with yourself with whatever you're experiencing. The classic phrase of "pick your battles," right? You might not understand exactly why someone you care for is that upset, but if you care enough to maintain the connection, you can just go give them a hug and drop the urge to be right about the situation or continue to argue about it. Every no hides a need. Another key practice is empathizing with someone's no. Take this example. A parent asks their child to help with dinner or clean their room, whatever it is, and the child says no. Instantly, the parent might spiral into thinking they're so disrespectful, they're lazy, they don't appreciate me, they're trying to make my life harder right now. But a no almost never means that. It often points to something else, a deeper, unmet need. Maybe the child is tired, overwhelmed, or craving choice instead of demand, or maybe connection from you in a different way. I know in my own experience, when my father asked me for help, I resisted hardcore, not because I didn't want to contribute to the family, but because of how he spoke to me. If the request came as a demand, or if he yelled while we were doing the task, my body tightened. My resistance was really about needing respect and gentleness, not refusing to care. When we can hear the need behind a no, we avoid taking it as rejection or taking it personally, and instead we see it as an opportunity for deeper understanding. Even silence can be empathized with. If someone goes quiet, instead of filling the space, I might gently ask, "What are you afraid of right now?" Or simply hold the quiet as a form of respect to them. Sometimes presence is enough, especially with men who are generally not as comfortable feeling or expressing vulnerable emotions. The best thing you can do is to be a safe space and gently try to guess what they might be experiencing. Are you feeling triggered? Do you need some space right now? Would you like me to just be quiet for a second while you process what's happening for you? This is a game changer. Now, on the contrary, what about lifeless conversations? What if they start going into this big rant? When my father traps me in a corner with endless lectures, draining my energy, here's something you can do. Here's a little secret. What bores the listener often bores the speaker as well. You might need to pause them and say, "Pause for a second. Let's check in with our intention and see if we're on the same page. Like, do we both just want to prioritize connection right now?" And often you find that you agree to the underlying core of what you're arguing about, but you might need to navigate it in a different way. And I could say, "Dad, I hear you saying a lot about this. Are you feeling passionate and really wanting me to understand your perspective right now?" Sometimes even just naming the dynamic itself can diffuse the tension. I once saw a friend avoid violence from a houseless man by using empathy and a clear request in a heated moment. He was like literally about to get a cigarette in his eye, and he like used these tools and just shifted the energy before authorities arrived. Empathy can literally save lives and save relationships. The most important thing I can emphasize in this video is the concept of self-empathy, the root of growth. When we can't get empathy from others, especially from people like my father, we must turn towards ourselves. That means speaking to ourselves in nonviolent communication, not shoulding, not sharing, shaming. By shoulding, I mean, "Oh, I should have did this differently. I should have done that." Not shaming ourselves. Self-judgment is an unmet need crying for attention. When I mourn the story of the kind of father that my inner child wishes I had, the grief of wishing things could be different, self-empathy for me might sound like, "Maeve, the grief you feel makes sense because you longed for shared love and protection, you deserved more gentleness and care, and you did the best you could with what you've been given, even when it often doesn't feel like it's enough in this world." I had to learn not to beat myself up for the partners I chose, the ones who activated the same childhood wounds of having an emotionally unavailable father. I wanted to see the goodness of others when I ignored the incompatibilities. I would connect with men too soon, thinking it would bond me to them. And it turns out I learned that men and women bond completely differently. That's a whole separate video for another day. But it's still a practice to forgive myself for the mistakes that I've made and my own time that I wasted. Self-forgiveness is born not from erasing the past, but from embracing the parts of ourselves that were so innocently just longing for love and to be chosen. So don't fix, stand steady. When we are compassionate with ourselves, when we can embrace all parts of ourselves, the wise, the wounded, and the messy, and the growing, the more compassion we offer inward, the more capacity we have to extend empathy outward to the world. So, whether you're staying with someone else's storm or sitting tenderly with your own, remember that empathy is less about fixing and more about standing steady with presence until love has room to breathe. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope that you learned something. And if you could just share this with someone who needs to hear it. I know empathy was a hard concept for me to grasp because I didn't receive a lot of it growing up. But now that I'm learning to cultivate more of it for myself and others, I really do think that it would make the world a better place. So please share and subscribe if this benefits you, and have a blessed week. Love to hear from you in the comments. So the topics I've discussed today come from this book by Marshall Rosenberg. I highly recommend that you grab yourself a copy. It was one of the most life-changing books I ever read, and I think the world would be a better place if everyone could read it. You can grab yourself a copy using my affiliate link below, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here.